Here's a highlight from a recent episode of Booked on Rock. Selena Fragassi, her brand new book, Pearl Jam Live, 35 Years of Legendary Music and Revolutionary Shows. Take us back to October 22nd, 1990. This is the very first show by Pearl Jam. They weren't called Pearl Jam yet. They're called Mookie Blaylock. This is an infamous hole-in-the-wall club in Seattle called the Off-Ramp Cafe. Tell us about this show, because this is not long after Mother Love Bone had suddenly ended.
Yeah, just a few months prior in March 1990, Andy Wood sadly passed away. Stone and Jeff were left to kind of consider their future for a time they didn't really want to pursue music in a very an official capacity until they met Eddie Vedder. And really, it was a demo tape that got into the hands of Eddie Vedder. That Stone's instrumentals were on it. Eddie created music and lyrics. He wrote his own version of really the Who's Tommy, his own rock opera. It was crazy, for lack of a better word, it really struck a chord and had an impact on this band. And so the craziest thing is that Eddie Vedder came to Seattle permanently October 8th. 14 days later, they had their first show and a lot of material written, which just seems impossible to me, to have material and chemistry and be ready to have a show. And the amount of pressure on everyone, particularly Eddie Vedder, at this very first date, knowing the Seattle community was there to see kind of like, who's this guy taking the place of Andy Wood. It was, to quote Chris Cornell, one of the best debuts he's ever seen. And in that room that night, Pearl Jam was made.
Yeah, he came from San Diego.
He sure did.
Yeah, the Mother Love Bone photographer was talking about people weren't welcoming. Yeah, they weren't welcoming Eddie Vedder with open arms. They did not want to accept him, but he won people over pretty quickly.
I would say so. Yeah, I think like he had a lot to prove that night. And I think he made a lot of non-believers sort of give him a chance. Lance is very vocal about the fact that he wanted to walk out when he saw this new guy on stage. And I think you have to understand the magnanimous of Andy Wood. People loved him. He was a showman. He was the heart and soul of the Seattle scene. And when he passed, my God, you cannot replace the man. And Stone and Jeff really didn't want to. That's why they began a new project and took someone really outside of Seattle to make this project gel. And so there were a lot of people who had their doubts, who wanted to see Eddie prove himself, but I think he sure did that first night.
Yeah, there was a pretty pivotal moment when Eddie Vedder finds his onstage power, his magic, or his influence over the audience. You call it in the book, The Night Eddie Came Alive, January 10th, 1991. Tell us about this one in Canada, Victoria, BC, Canada.
Yeah, so Pearl Jam had only had several shows under their belt at this point. It was only a few months after their first show, and they were opening for Alice in Chains, whose Facelift EP was out. So they were the support act. They only played a few songs, but Eddie was noticing the crowd was really rowdy and not paying attention, and I think he was motivated to get them to pay attention, and so he did the unthinkable and just started his very crazy Tarzan theatrics.